Right everyone, I'm going to tell you who is the best Bujinkan instructor in my opinion, and it's not Hatsumi. So before we go into the video, get yourself a copy of the Book of Bushido. This will tell you really how the samurai really behaved. Get yourself a copy of Ninja Skills because you're interested in the Bujinkan, which means you like ninja. And then, but to round it all off, get yourself a copy of How to Be a Modern Samurai. If you do that, you'll be pretty much on track to making a rounded student of yourself alongside your Bujinkan training. So let's go into it. Who is the greatest Bujinkan instructor in the world? Right, the greatest instructor is actually Dennis Bartram, okay? Now, I'll tell you that straight away, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to go through a few things with you to build up to that. But basically, you should follow him on Active Balance Health Through Integration on YouTube, and it's all there, and you can follow his channel. So get over there, subscribe, and support Dennis. I have trained all over the world in Bujinkan people, with Bujinkan people. I've trained with Masaki Hatsumi, I've trained with Shoto Tanemura, and I've trained with lots of different sort of Bujinkan high-class guys. The Sven guy, I forget his name now, and you've been to these events and I've done all that. And I spent a year in Japan with Hatsumi, I spent a year in Japan with Tanemura, and by far the best person I've ever trained with by a long shot is Dennis Bartram. By a long shot, and he outstrips them all, to be honest. So I did a video recently, well, within this last 12 months, that said, what do we think about the Bujinkan martial arts? Now, if you've come into this and you're not a Bujinkan member and you're like, Bujinkan martial arts are rubbish, the conclusion of that video, which you should go and watch, was basically, if you're pretty hard and you're used to fighting, then Bujinkan will help you if you get rid of the naff stuff and get rid of the silly stuff. Okay, so go watch that video and you'll understand it, but this is Dennis Bartram. The first thing you should understand is that Dennis Bartram is from the northeast of England. So if you look there, the North Sea, I'll show you a short picture now. He comes from near Newcastle on Tyne, Sunderland and all that. And he's actually not technically a Geordie, but he's from Hartlepool around there. And these are rough people. Now, I'm from Manchester, Salford, which is a really rough sort of area, and we're used to gangsters and knives and all that. But when you go up to the northeast, you keep your mouth shut and just say yes, sir, because they're bloody rough lads, to be fair. It's your average night in Geordie land. Here they are, you know. It's have a quiet drink, and this always happens. You go out in the northeast, and this is happening. And, like, you know, it's worse than Manchester, to be fair. And not like few Americans where you have gun crime, we have a lot of street crime, just like, you know. So this is like, right, lads have had a drink, let's go. So he came from this background in the 1950s, and he was one of the Teddy Boys. The Teddy Boys were a offshoot of American culture in England from the sort of like rockers, and they were against the mods pretty much, and you get all the mods coming in the 60s. Teddy Boys are 50s, mods 60s, rockers 70s, but they all cross over and fight each other. So one of the things I remember Dennis telling me, which he said it wasn't him who did it, but there was what the Teddy Boys used to do, because they wore jackets, they used to put razor blades down their lapel, so when anybody came to grab an headbutt them, they'd just slice all their fingers open like that. So to just set you up, that's the sort of scene you're coming from. So Dennis himself is a very hard man. He's just naturally hard, and I think he started mainly in karate. So on top of his upbringing, Dennis is a product of the 1960s, 70s karate movement, and going into the 80s, and then he started with the Bujinkan early on, like in the early 80s, just after Hayes basically, and he started learning Bujinkan. Now, whether you agree with Bujinkan techniques or whatever, he went from being a good natural fighter to being a good karate fighter to actually taking on board the principles of the Bujinkan, and that's where he found his sort of where he wanted to be. Now, there is something I need to say about his training beforehand, and I'll say that now so you can understand where he's coming from as a person. So, right, there's one big thing about Dennis, and some people do capture his training and say, oh, this isn't rubbish and this doesn't work and nobody fights like that. Dennis is, for all he's good at fighting, right, and I'm going to be honest with you, behind the scenes, if you talk to him, he's a rough lad, but when he's on the camera and all that, and when it all goes away, and it's like, oh, movement and all this. So Dennis's job is to fix your bones. He's an osteopath, basically, and he fixes your bones, and that is his full-time job. And he went down that line, the natural healing medicine line, and his main focus on all of his YouTube videos, all of his training, all of his seminars is natural movement and how to get power from naturally moving. He's gone through Hatsumi to say, okay, how do we move this? He sits in his garden moving rocks on pivots, and he comes from a non-educated background from the northeast, working lads, but got himself educated in a lot of stuff and talks to people all over the world about body movement, body mechanics, the bones. And what he doesn't know about bones, you don't need to know, right? And basically, He has NHS nurse, so National Health Service, our English hospitals, the nurses come to visit him for moving patients and move stuff, a bit like Kono from Japan, and they come to him for training. He'll tell you how to move people, how does this work, and his entire seminars are about fixing or movement, not about fighting. But you switch the camera off and he'll give you right pasting, right? But the minute you put the camera on, he doesn't really do that much. So I have been to train with him multiple times, and basically, so people have caught me in clips and said, oh, what's this? You're just running at him and he touches you and all this. Well, actually, what that bit of the video is, what we found is actually where back in the day, what he used to do is say, right, this is how the body moves. And he'd make you walk and then he'd touch your head and he'd say, come faster, do that. And then, of course, we didn't film, and in the sort of thing you say, right, but if you're in a fight, it's like bang, this, you know, in this moment, boom, that goes over. But the actual training was like, right, people walk at each other, see how you move the temple, what happens when somebody's walking, you move the jaw and watch how their feet move, and this creates that. And then in reality, he was like, click, bang, and he knocked me out, maybe twice, I think he's knocked me out, actually knocked me out, and I was like, doof. But he doesn't. He says, don't scrap at each other. Learn how to move, learn how to train, learn how to walk, and it'll show you what is actually happening in the human body. So when you go and watch his videos, be aware he's a movement specialist. But behind closed doors, he's a violent motherfucker. It's bloody hard. So basically, this is an old seminar from God knows when, probably 2003. This is me, if you can see. And this is the sort of stuff he would walk. This was my warm-up session. I'd arrived late because it was 2.5 hours away, and we were in a right mess. So he would basically warm me up. He just moves you around. He doesn't stay with static drills, and he doesn't have a like weird boxing. He just says, come on, just come and grab me and have a go. Well, he isn't focused on basically doing what you would do in a street fight, which is where people get understand. But you see, if he wants to, he'll just knock you out. And he has done it to a few times. You just get that moment where you're not checking and he'll outright knock you out. But his point is let's learn how the body moves. Let's learn how the body rolls. So the same as Hatsumi has that fluidity, Dennis has it, but he has it far better with a strong, there's no like, he won't let you get away with anything. If he wants to, he'll just knock you out. Like he'll say, like, get on the floor. And, you know, obviously it's a bit like, not Aikido, but Aikijutsu. He hits me there and he says, are you okay? But I said, I'm all right. I said, he didn't hit me hard enough. And then he belts me, basically, but he tells me off. But so that's what I mean. So he said, are you warmed up? I says, nearly. So then he goes, right, get back then. And then he has a go. But it's all good fun. But we haven't, but you say, he doesn't do everything from a sort of like static drill purpose. So I just want to say this. I'm trying to be clear with this because people look at it and say, oh, that's not how you fight. And I agree that's not, and he knows that. But he, as I said, he's proved to me many times that he knows the bits Hatsumi knows, which is the fluidity and the movement, and he knows the body inside out, and he ends it in one go. And I want you to know that. But I would recommend for Bujinkan people, you follow Dennis Bartram and just remember about movement, how movement works and what he does with movement. To give you an idea of what Dennis actually does, listen to him. This is his real job and how he works with the human body.
If that's in torsion, all of the organs are in torsion. In between, they're all wrapped in fascia. In the spaces between the fascia, these nerves run. But also that's where the acupuncture circuits run. And so blockage on one causes blockage on the other. And so as we're opening those channels up, you're helping the whole system work.
So I'm now going to explain to you, I'm going to show you a bit of footage of me and Dennis again, and I'm going to explain why he's better than a Hatsumi. Now, first of all, the reason I consider Hatsumi quite good, or was quite good, is because, now Dennis says in this, if you listen to this, he says, you'll never put technique on a fighter. You'll never ever get 1, 2, 3, 4. That will never work. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look nice. So all these people sort of training 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's basics and it's all right, but you've got to get past that. There's a scrap and a scrumble, and eventually you're going to have to pick what you take. So these are called quarter movements, and you hear me saying there about quarter movements. So when somebody goes to put a lock on, you start moving their elbow, that's your quarter movement, and it moves something there, and that gives you something else. You don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. Quarter movement, they'll move, quarter, and eventually they tie themselves up and you take them. And there's a moment he says you'll just rip it. So again, he always trains like this, because if you just train hard and punch each other and smack, you sort of, it's the basic level stuff. So we're assuming that he's assuming you've already done all this, 1, 2, 3. Or he's saying you can train in a totally different ways. You learn how to quarter move all the way through and you pick your point and then bang, done. So just watch this and listen. I'll try and do a bit of voiceover. But this is why he's better than Hatsumi. Because Hatsumi will be soft and let it go. But Dennis is like a rod inside of it and he's just soft outside. But there's a rod. And if you try to push him, you're not getting nowhere or he's gone. He controls everything no matter what. And you can see he control it and he'll end it anytime you want.
Understand the plain set? Right. So once I've got something, I've got cohesion. I've got cohesion now. I've got cohesion. It's stuffed. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
So see what's happening there? And one of them, just then, that happened for a moment in time. Right, so you try to put this on, flipping away. That's all you're going to get. You understand that?
Is that back to that quarter movement?
Quarter movement.
Right.
And now I've got cohesion, you go that wheel. Change direction. Keep the cohesion. Keep the cohesion. Keep it. Keep it. Stop.
Not there.
None of it's strength. None of it's technique. You'll never get a technique on the fighter. If you think you will, you're wasting time. If you call that a technique, it isn't. It's the end of the flow. Breaks. For sure.
So if you don't understand what's going on there, basically, because the first question would be, why don't you just punch and why don't you just kick him? The point of this exercise, and it is an exercise because the truth is, in a real fight, it ends within, he's saying, you get quarter moves. One person grabs it, you move slightly until you get cohesion. So cohesion is this, yeah? So instead of like, I'm going to grab and we strike and then we're struggling. You see the bouncers with the other lads trying to get it on, they struggle. You just touch. Kinesthetic awareness, touch, put pressure on, and then once you feel it move, you either go with it or move and manipulate. And he's saying, Anthony, just keep trying to grab me, and we'll go with it until I find something inside of there. And he found there was a moment there where he had cohesion, and it was like, I've got it. And he says, bang, this is what will happen. And that's what he's saying will do. So when people watch Dennis, they say, oh, this is just people moving around in some sort of weird thingy. He's saying, no, this is the exercise. This is how to train. You move, you find, you keep finding it. And the point is for you, it's like muscle memory. You keep training and training and training until you learn what those things are. So basically, it's movement like this, and you'll be like moving, and that's it, you're in one. And you found this. It's like, I found that one, bang, that's it, it's off. And he said, there's no technique. You have to know the technique, but he's saying you don't have to train in that very traditional way. And he believes back in the old days, they trained much more like this when it was one-on-one, father on son, uncle and son, and things like this, train like this. So he's saying, just play Anthony until we find something. And then he said, so the idea is that in real life, when it comes, somebody grips you and you go, bang, that's it. You found something. It's like, we found nothing. It's messy, found, gone, down, and that's it. So that's the point of Dennis's play. So again, I highly recommend that you follow Dennis's channel. It is active balance through integration. And remember, it's a health channel. It's not a fighting channel. Dennis did all his fighting when he was 15 to 25, 30, and then he studied health and well-being. However, he is the closest you'll ever get to a real samurai fighter from the Sengoku period. If you were to go back to the Sengoku period, in my opinion, you would have a martial arts masters of the past, you would have Dennis Bartram would fit in well. It's not this pie may bloody, fantasy. It's a real man who knows how to destroy the body, who's a small man, but who's built like a gorilla. He's basically a silverback. He'll rip your hand out of its shoulder joint. And I've been in positions where when it's just me and him training, and I think I want to cry and go home, because this is he would tear my limbs off, basically. So follow him. So that's why, that's why I believe Dennis Bartram is probably the best Bujinkan teacher, because the Bujinkan is one of the martial arts where it's I would say, now hear me out here, it's possibly a higher level martial art simply because it broke away from the static training. I believe that in the old days, they taught 5-year-olds kata like this, and they taught 5-year-olds this sort of stuff, and yup, and that. And then after about that age, 7, 8, 9, 10, they start to say, right, free it up a bit. You know, come on, you've got past your baby steps, let's go. And Dennis is that man that you go to when you've done your baby steps, and you go and find you've done it all, and then you go and say, hey, you know, show me how to really now put this into a combat. And the honest answer is no fight looks beautiful like that. You're in a scrap and you're all over the place, and inside of that scrap you've got to find something. That's where Hatsumi stopped, and he just was like, I think he was like, oh, this works and that works, and look at me, and I can fall down these men and stuff. Dennis is well aware, and you can see it when Hatsumi moves, he's like this, and it's all thinking, but so you'd push him and he'd fall over. But Dennis, you push him and you get your head snapped off. You push, and he's already like, wow, he's on you. And Hatsumi's not. And the problem is Hatsumi stopped training himself and started showing off to people 30 years ago. So that's why I think Dennis Bartram, if you're going to learn a real martial art, if you're going to change the Bujinkan into a real martial art that really works, you have to get rid of the nonsense that came about. There's branches in Bujinkan. There's the Shoto Tanemura branch that stayed like this, there's this branch that stayed there, and Dennis is probably the best branch to go down, because you get the freedom that Hatsumi gave, of the freedom of movement, the training of the body and everything, and the deep understanding of the physical body, versus, you know, reality in a street fight, because he's from a real area that really do street fights, and he's not daft, and he's used it, and he's like, this will work, this doesn't work, this is what you've got to do, and you've got to grab that. And you don't always win. Remember, samurai don't always win. Somebody has to lose in a battle, so you might get your head kicked in by somebody who's really hard. But the point is you train like, if you train in like martial arts where it's gone Aikido style or Bujinkan style, normal Bujinkan style, you're probably going to get your head pounded in because you've not really pushed it. So Dennis is the only man I know who pushes it. So I hope you enjoyed that and you stayed with me until the end. Again, if you want to round it all up, get yourself a copy of How to Be a Modern Samurai. Go for ninja skills if you want to learn about the ninja stuff, and if you want to learn about samurai codes of honor and the reality of burning down your enemies and murdering people, the Book of Bushido. That is the reality of it. Enjoy.